Hi, I'm Michelle. I decided to start making videos about books, and I'm really excited about it. I figured a good place to start so you can see what my reading style is like is to show you the books I read in December. The first book I read in December was Hot Water Music by Charles Bukowski. This is a collection of short stories written by Bukowski in 1983, or it was published in 1983, and I didn't like it very much, to be honest. I gave it 2 stars on Goodreads because most of the stories I felt were repeating the same themes. I was trying to read it with an open mind. Sometimes you read things that you don't agree with or think are good morally, and that can still be a good book, but this book just seemed to take it a little bit too far, I thought, and a lot of the stories are about rape, drunks, inappropriate sexual behavior, inappropriate sexual relationships, womanizing, just lots of things I don't really want to read about. So I didn't really like this one, but apparently people do. The next book I read, which I've already returned to the library, so I'll put a picture here, was called The Red Leather Diary, Reclaiming a Life Through the Pages of a Lost Journal by Lily Koppel. This book I found out about through reading a New York Times article about this journalist who found this journal that was in a dumpster, and it was a 5-year journal, and it was of this girl who was 14 to 19 when she was writing the journal, living in New York, and she had quite the life. And I didn't really like it as much as the article. I liked reading the article, that was really interesting, but the book seemed to take a little bit too much detail. I just kind of lost interest through it, but I gave it a 2 star as well. But the book and article did inspire me to get my own 5-year journal, which I asked for Christmas. So this is it. It's nice because it's not overwhelming. You only have a few lines to write something, and I've been keeping up with it every night, and I think it's so pretty. Okay, the third book I read in December was The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy by Douglas Adams. This took me a while to get into it. At first I was very confused, but I actually ended up loving it. It's the story of this Earthling who gets rescued by a friend of his who's an alien just the day before the Earth explodes, and they end up going throughout space, collecting different people along the way, going on different adventures, finding out the meaning of life, 42, and it is just really funny. There was parts where I was just rolling my eyes, there were parts where I laughed out loud, the whole thing about the mice, if you know what I'm talking about, and I just thought it was really great, and I kind of want to watch the movie again. I give this 4 stars on Goodreads because I really liked it. The next book I read was Howl by Allen Ginsberg. This is a poem, and this version is a graphic novel version, which, if it wasn't for this graphic novel version, I would not have read this. Also, if it wasn't for the Book Riot Read Harder Challenge, I would not have read this. I had 1 category left on my challenge, which was poetry. I am not a poetry person, so I chose this. I read it in a day, Christmas Eve, which was not timely, and I didn't really like it. I just didn't really get it. I really like the pictures of this version though. It is quite nice. So if you like poetry, if you like graphic novels, you might like this version, but I didn't, and I gave it 2 stars. Next, I read Clockwork Orange by Anthony Burgess. This is a classic novel that most people have watched the movie or heard of the movie, but never read the book. The book is very difficult to read. It is super short. There's only 150 pages in it, but the author, Anthony Burgess, he created a new language for this book, and when you're reading it, it doesn't explain what each word means. It just writes it as if you know that language. Eventually, after like a third of the book, you start to pick up on what the words mean, and you can start to read it a lot quicker, but at the beginning it is slow going. The book follows a guy who is 15 years old, but it seems like he's a lot older, in a dystopian world, and he does horrible things. He rapes old women, he beats up old men. He's a horrible person, and finally gets caught and goes to jail. After a couple years in jail, he gets selected to be part of this program that is supposed to cure someone of being bad. So he goes through this program of being forced to watch horrible, horrible things while getting tortured. It is really hard to read at the beginning, but once he gets to the jail, other people don't talk in the same language, and it gets a lot easier, and then I flew through the rest of the book. So I really recommend this. It was hard to read the beginning, A, for the language, but B, because of the horrible things he's doing. But it ends up being really good. It's a really interesting discussion on morals and how to, like the prison system, how to help people become good. And I really liked it. I gave it 4 stars. But the next book I read was Scarlet, which is number 2 of the Lunar Chronicles by Marissa Myers. This is the sequel to Cinder, which I read earlier this year. This series is retellings of fairy tales in a sci-fi world. They're quick, easy reading books, young adult, fantasy, sci-fi. So I thought they'd be good to finish up the last 4 books I needed to read for my Goodreads challenge. I actually really like Scarlet. This one is a retelling of Little Red Riding Hood, and it's a lot more romance heavy, I think. I didn't like that quite as much, but I really liked that it follows Cinder. Just like the next day, you still get to read about Cinder as well. I was scared that it was going to be a whole new story, and I gave this one 3 stars. Next I read Landline by Rainbow Rowell. I have read a few of Rainbow Rowell's books and I have liked them okay, but this one I really, really loved. It's her adult fiction book. It's about this woman who decides to stay home and work on her career instead of going to her husband's family's house for Christmas. During that week, she discovers that if she calls her husband on this landline at her mom's house, she calls him back in time from when they were first dating, right before he had first proposed to her. Normally, I hate time travel books, but this one I liked because she doesn't actually travel in time, she just talks to someone in a different time. And this one was so interesting. I really like her dialogue, the way she writes dialogue in this book. It was just so easy to read and funny and interesting, and there was just so many things about the marriage, the relationship that were so interesting and complex but realistic. But I really, really like this. I really recommend it. I gave it 5 stars, which is hard to get 5 stars out of me. So. Next I read another book on my Kobo, Cress, the number 3 in Lunar Chronicles by Marissa Meyer. This was just continuing on again. I don't usually read books in a series right back to back, so this was kind of unusual for me, even though I did still have a book in between, but it was about 2 days later. The third one was my favorite so far. This follows the story of Rapunzel, and but is actually a girl who is stuck on a satellite, and she gets rescued, and then they are on Earth, and it again follows the story continuing on with Cinder and Scarlet now. But in this one they all get separated, which is sad. But this one was definitely my favorite, and I gave it 4 stars. Also, I had 1 DNF this month. DNF stands for Did Not Finish. I tend to have a few DNFs. I pick up books I get interested in but then lose interest really quickly. Before I picked up Howl, I had to read something for that poetry category on the Read Harder Challenge. I am not a poetry person, so I went to the library and I picked up Christmas poems, thinking for some reason that I would read this. And it is like 200, small, but 200 pages of poems about Christmas. I think I read 3 poems. And my boyfriend and I had a joke that if I started reading Christmas poems, it was time for bed. So those are the 9 books I read in December 2015. I had some good books I read, some really different for me books, really outside my comfort zone, but it was really fun. So thank you for watching, and I will see you later.